That's where Squire Strength comes in. Squire Strength is going to transition you from an absolute ground zero beginner level into something that is starting strength, Texas method, grayscale LP, these beginner and intermediate programs that require some knowledge of a barbell and some understanding of the gym to perform. This program is designed for the person who hasn't touched anything before and wants to get into that kind of gym work. Hi, I'm Tyler from Unbound Athletic, and today we're going to cover Squire Strength in its fullest. This program is fully available in the link in the description in a small Excel spreadsheet, but if you want a better quality version that has trackable progression, we have our app, Unbound Athletic app, also in the link in the description. You can use my link to help get you there, and that'll allow you to run through in a bit more of a user-friendly variation. The spreadsheets aren't user-friendly, but they're free. So if you don't have the money, spreadsheets are for you guys who can look at just moving through the program and understand it from a standard Excel spreadsheet format. Let's jump into the program. What do we have behold on us? We've got main lifts. We've got accessories. We're going to cover the main lifts first and talk about why they're there and how we can progress things. If you're kind of working a little bit faster than normal and you kind of are seeing exponential growth and progression, you feel more confident and you actually just have general good mobility and barbell awareness, you might progress faster in this workout than someone who's never touched a barbell or maybe isn't confident with those movements and wants to take a bit more time. So the program works in both ways. That allows for those athletes who are a little bit faster in progressing, but also caters for the guys who aren't. Our first 3 weeks is going to be groundwork, looking at touching variations of the main lifts and looking at touching on main accessory movements that we're likely to see in a powerlifting or strength program to make us a bit more familiar and confident with some of the supplementary movements you'll see on the market there. So day one's going to start with box squats and seated barbell overhead press. So these are very standard variations of the movements. The box squat is almost what we could call a half back squat, where we're looking at aiming for a height or an object that allows us to A, generate more explosive power, but B, we don't have to worry so much about constraints of mobility. So if we lack mobility, this allows us to then perform the movement to a relatively challenging weight, still focusing on ideal mechanics, but we're not having to be required to squat to a certain depth. Obviously, we want to progress this week to week, so as we get a little bit more confident, we lower that height that we're looking at squatting to help force the body to produce a bit more range of motion and a bit more mobility to get to those positions that's ideal, which for everyone is about a 90-degree squat. The box squat is going to start relatively light. We're looking at building 3 sets of 5, same with the seated overhead press, and then week to week you'll progress that up to week 3, where at that point we'll transition to the back squat. Now, bit of a caveat for this program, it works in both ways. One of the ways being, if you aren't ready to progress to the back squat yet, you can repeat week 1 and continue building some momentum on the box squat as you build some confidence. Whether that may be you have a nagging knee injury, your hips are super tight, or we just don't feel confident with the movement in general, super unstable or something like that, we can always take it back a step and head back to week 1 and just keep repeating week 1 to 3 until we feel confident enough to jump to week 4 to 6. That doesn't mean you can't jump on all of your lifts. Maybe you'll just hold your back squat back until it feels confident and ready enough to look at progressing forward. Seated overhead press, if anything, that's a harder variation than our standard barbell standing strict press. Why I like the seated overhead press is it restricts any movement through the thoracic and keeps the back nice and neutral, so you can just focus on pushing the bar up and controlling it down. So the shoulders get all the work that they require. Yes, the weight will be a little bit lighter than what you can establish on a regular barbell overhead press, but what that does mean is that we get to focus on the movement without worrying about all these other mechanics until we are confident enough, just like the back squat, to then progress to the next step. If you, from the get-go, feel super confident, you can always jump ahead to the overhead press and start building that if needed. But that is day 1 as far as the main lifts go. Day 2, looking at tempo pause bench press and our chest supported row variation. Now, tempo pause bench press, I like it because what I don't like seeing is this jungle street bench style where we just crash into the chest and press back up. We don't learn any control, we don't learn any patience, and we're not understanding the ideal bar path for the bench press to travel for your build and mechanics. The tempo pause will focus on making sure the lats are still engaged and tight. We're controlling down to that bottom point. The pause, A, increases range of motion, but B, allows us to generate a little bit more power and explosiveness out of the bottom, and C, it creates a bit more tension through the pecs, gaining a bit more hypertrophy. This way we can look at progressing this over the couple of weeks, and the transition from week 1 to 3 to week 4 to 6 is just removing the tempo, focusing more on that pause bench press, because now we've established that groundwork of that bar path. I would highly recommend everyone who's new to bench press press to stay 3 weeks on the tempo pause before progressing to the pause bench press. Unless you've already got some pre-experience there, you can just jump straight ahead. But if not, really focus on that timing and tension and your setup position for that one as well. Chest supported row, same as the strict press. We're just taking out the hinging mechanics of the row. We're just focusing on pulling the bar in, feeling the lats engage, feeling everything nice and tight before relaxing. This can be either dumbbell or barbell. I've got a couple of variations and a video on screen that you'll see now of how I set that one up, but each variation is going to be very similar to the other. Just try whatever feels best for you. If you've got a chest supported row machine, then I would definitely go for that if you can, and if not, these are some other options that all people from all gyms should be able to utilize. Same thing, once we get more confidence there, the bent over row with that hinging mechanic is a little bit more challenging, does require a bit more stabilization. It's going to be a little bit harder for people who do have some lower back issues, so those chest supported variations can be there to help protect people who are struggling with some lower back problems, and they can spend a few weeks on that a bit longer if they need to before progressing to that next one up. Day 3, we're going to look at our deadlift session. So we've got rack pulls and our body weight hip thrusts to start. Rack pulls, we're looking at doing it from a height, about knee height to start. This will just allow us to work good deadlift mechanics and setup without having to be excessively hunched over, especially for newbies and beginners when they start off. It is so hard to get that right deadlift position and to maintain good posture. Whether it's sumo or conventional, it's still a challenging start position. The rack pull allows us to develop our starting position without having to focus so much on all those other details from the ground. Week to week with this one, just like the box squat, we're going to reduce the height of the rack as we get lower. So if you get closer to the ground, you might even end up on 2 20-kilo plates or 2 inches roughly, and that's still going to provide us with a little bit of height, so we're not going to be so stressed about being in that bottom position, but it's not going to be the same as just pulling a bar from the conventional position on the ground. That will transition to the deadlifts in week 4 to 6. That being obviously said, if you've done it before, you can always move yourself there quickly and start from week 3 and then progress week 3 to week 6 if needed. The bodyweight hip thrust is the only one that has a triple progression, where week 1 we end up starting with that bodyweight hip thrust. Week 2 and 3 we move to a dumbbell hip thrust, so we're a bit more accustomed to it. We can also add a band for that bodyweight hip thrust. This is just because a lot of people don't have that body awareness to get into the hip thrust position. I like to think with my elbows, I'm like in a spa bath, and I kind of rested on that bench, and then I get my back seated on there, and then I move from there. But apparently that's a lot harder than it looks. A lot of people struggle with it, especially if you're a larger gentleman or lady. It can be really impossible to get into that hip thrust position because the bar is just too uncomfortable to kind of slide under. So these are some caveats and things that we can add in to just get you some good stimulus. Bodyweight hip thrust can add a slingshot bend around the knees to create a bit more stimulus to the glutes. We then progress that to a dumbbell hip thrust. For most people, they're able to maintain that. I like to think pushing the dumbbell into the thighs as I'm performing the reps. And then if you can, we'll progress that to the barbell hip thrust, which will have its own little progression as I cover week 4 to 6. Speaking of which, let's cover the next phase of the program, week 4 to 6. Obviously, if you are moving through the program methodically, you've done the first 3 weeks, you've covered all those movements. Everything's 3x5 except for the barbell hip thrust, which is going to be 3x8. The only movement that has a different rep scheme. Everything's going to start comfortably. We're going to add 2.55 kilos every week until we get to week 4, where we look at changing the movements to challenging variations. We've got back squat, overhead press, pause bench press, bent over row, and deadlift. And hopefully we're at the stage where we're doing barbell hip thrust as well. Most of them are 3x5, so back squat, overhead press, pause bench press, and row, 3x5. We've got 1x5 deadlifts. Obviously, deadlift has a much bigger fatigue ratio. It's just looking for a challenging set of 5. And then we get 3 sets on week 1, or technically week 4 in this case, of the hip thrust, 2 sets on week 5, and then just 1 set on week 6 as the deadlift gets heavier and heavier. We're just reducing total volume for that one. Once we get to that final week, all of these lifts, back squat, overhead press, pause bench, bent over row, deadlift, and hip thrust will be building to a 5, unless it's the hip thrust, rep max on each of those lifts, which will put you perfectly in a position, especially squat, bench, deadlift, to then progress to something like starting strength or Texas method, where they require your 5 RM to start those programs. Even the Grayscale LP sets of 5 on most of those lifts. It's just easier for you to transition if you know what your rough max is. That being said, obviously, the main caveat of the 5 RM is good technique. Don't make it look shit. It needs to be good. If it's crap or we feel uncomfortable, stop there, count your last set as your total weight, and then you're good to go. I think that's mainly everything covered for the main lifts. Let's talk about accessories. Accessories are pretty straightforward. Day 1, we've got week 1 to 3, we've got our left side of the board. Week 4 to 6 is going to be our right side of the board. So day 1, leg press and machine shoulder press. They're going to be our first main two movements. I like these two movements. Leg press specifically builds overall leg strength. We can focus on a strong drive through the legs. We can practice setting up in our squatting stance. And for most people, it's accessible at their gym. It's relatively simple. It doesn't require much thought. Once you learn how to do the little safety device, you're pretty much sweet to go, and we can push some big weights on there if the squat isn't so comfortable. Machine shoulder press is the same thing. We're under constant mechanical tension the whole time. It gives us a bit more volume in the shoulders. It's super safe and it's hard to do it wrong. Most machines have one way to press, and that's up. So you're in a good spot there for those ones. Day two, looking at progressing a little bit further on some of those lifts. Day two, we've got a machine chest press. Same thing with the bench. If we're not confident, we're working on the technique. The chest press variation, we can look at pushing some more volume into the pecs, triceps, and shoulders, make things a little bit more nicer. This can be lying, or this can be a seated variation, whatever you have in your gym, whatever you find more comfortable for you. Seated row, obviously it's going to be seated row machine. It can be close grip, mid grip, wide grip, whatever you have options available, what feels comfortable for you. It's the same thing. It's just going to add more volume to our seated row or chest supported row variations that we have in our first couple of sessions. We've got the machine hip thrust if available. I know a lot of gyms don't have that, so sled drag will be our alternative. We add a chain, like a dip belt around our waist. We've got slingshot band if we can around our thighs, and we're just looking at slowly, methodically plodding backwards, developing nice strong glutes and hamstrings for that one. That one's super simple. We don't really need much skill to perform that. We just got to walk slowly. We're going to have a half squat, and we just keep moving backwards. Final session, also in that machine hip thrust, we've got hamstring curls as our alternative accessory for the hamstrings. Not much hamstring work overall in the program, so I think the hamstring curls will fit in nicely here on that session 3 particular program. From there, all these accessories will progress forward. The leg press is the only one that really sticks around, so we're looking at progressing from that one onwards. It goes from 5x12 week 1, just by the way, for all these accessories, 5x12 RP6 week 1, 3x12 dropping the volume a little bit, RP8 increasing the intensity, to basically a heavy set of 12 on all of the accessories, RP10 on that one. Week 4, when we head over to these other accessories, which we'll cover in just a moment, it moves back to 5x10 again, RP6, 3x10 RP8, and then there's no accessories on the week 6. We're just looking at hitting those 5 RMs and maintaining some consistency throughout. This will also be kind of a bit of a deload week for the rest of your movements. Hopefully your muscles will recover, CNS will be a bit fatigued, but if you restart the program again, that first week's really nice and light, so you're able to kind of rinse and repeat pretty comfortably. The changes, leg press to leg press, that's the same. We've got machine shoulder press to dumbbell shoulder press, obviously an increase in complexity. You'll see a lot of dumbbell shoulder press in programs to help build some single arm stability, make sure we're ironing out any unilateral imbalances. This is good to add in. Once again, 5x10, 3x10. No need to max this one out. I don't like maxing out dumbbells, it's a bit scary, unless it's dumbbell bench. Shoulder press, it can be a bit of an issue when dumbbells fly from side to side, so it's good that one's kind of not in. Seated row into dumbbell row, same idea, but we get, once again, unilateral imbalances. We get to work some single arm work. We get to address some instabilities if we do have them through the upper back, biceps, etc. And then on the final day, the machine hip thrusts and the hamstring curls will transition to dumbbell RDLs, because we've only got one set, just one set of deadlifts. I'm looking at further improving those hamstrings, mid to lower back, and glutes. The dumbbell RDL is a pretty staple movement you'll see in most programs. It's lighter, so you can push it. You don't have to push the weight so heavy. The reps are quite high, the RP is quite low, so it's not going to affect overall fatigue as we come into that final week of training. So I think it's a good variation. Of course, this is only stage 1 of Squire strength. This will have variants and upgrades. I've had the beta phase out for about the last 6 months as I've progressed it with my clients. A lot of them young boys who gamers, who have never been to the gym before, have never touched strength before. I found this stuff works, and some of them progress faster than others, but they all end up getting to this phase of the program. They all end up finding some decent weights, and they do it safely, and it looks nice. From there, I can progress them to bigger and better things. Most of them I've run through things like the Texas method, Grayscale LP, or the Juggernaut program, and these just seem to work fantastic. But if you're interested in giving this a go, or if you have any questions, comment down below. But in the description, there is a spreadsheet with the program itself, as well as a link to our app, which has the program on it with a bit of an easier way to run through it. That also includes nutrition if you're looking at some nutrition stuff as well. It's also included as part of the app, which makes it kind of all automated for you, so you don't have to think, you can just do. Cool, hope you enjoyed this video. There'll be plenty more videos coming out for this series for each of the movements, running through some explanations on how to perform them and some bit more talk through run throughs. We'll touch a bit more on the accessories in the future. I'll catch you guys on the next video. Enjoy, and hope you found this valuable.